Good Saturday morning, Facebook. My name is Denise Krebs, and I am thrilled to have with me today for Authors Week, Miss Veda Pendleton. So welcome, Miss Veda.
Thank you, Denise. Veda Pendleton.
Veda, so sorry.
It's okay.
It has been, gosh, I was thinking this morning, when in the world did I meet Veda, and how long has it been? And I do not remember how long it's been. A while.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and I kept thinking, was it at church or where was it? So I'm not sure.
I'm thinking it was either a chamber event, or through Savaskia, maybe.
It could have been.
So,
it really could have been. Okay.
I don't know. It seems like it's in the business part of my brain memory, not the church side of my brain memory,
Okay.
but sometimes they commingle. Yeah. So anyway, nonetheless, welcome.
Well,
And
thank you.
yeah. So actually, your post was one of the sparks to do this whole Authors Week interview. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah. You posted a comment, probably 3 weeks ago, about a newspaper article that you were written up in about your book.
Okay, I did.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, I didn't know that she was an author. And so it started a conversation with us on Facebook Messenger because I was curious that I didn't know you wrote a book. And that kind of sparked and catapulted this whole week that I ended up putting together, because it made me go, oh, I know that Kat is an author, and I know that Kibi is an author, and I wonder who else is. And so it kind of gave me that jump start. So thank you for that inspiration.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your book and what prompted you to write it to begin with.
Okay, well, I'm going to share a little bit. This is actually my 5th book.
No way.
Yeah, in 10 years. So this is the 5th. 3 of the others have been about parenting. So that's, an area that I tend to think I have some expertise in. I have
children?
5 grown children. I have 5 grown children and 7 grandchildren. So that's an area about which I have written. I've also published other things in magazines and academic journals and blogs, and so I enjoy writing. But I'm going to show you my book.
Yes.
This is my book. It's called Prepped: Coming of Age in Black and White America. It is a memoir about my journey from Pine Bluff, Arkansas in the 1970s to an all-girls prep school in Connecticut. And I left my predominantly Black community where schools had recently integrated and went to a community that was predominantly white. There were 7 Black students there at the school and no adults of color. And so this is the story of my journey during that time.
Wow. It's, I remember when I was in high school, Kentucky had just started the busing. Well, that's actually not true. They had started, I remember my brother, who's 8 years older than me, was not bused. My sister, who was 5 years older than me, was bused in 10th grade. And then I was bused in 5th. And by the time I got to 10th, which would have been my 2nd year, they didn't need to bus anymore because the community had integrated on its own. So it was, I didn't think anything about it, growing up in that time, because I had friends who were Caucasian and I had friends who were of color. And to me, it was no big deal. And it's still not a big deal. But I understand for some of the previous students, who were older than me, and certainly for a generation older, it was a big deal. So, what did you learn? Don't tell us all about your book, but what was one of your big um, takeaways from your life journey?
Well, for this particular segment, it's important for my readers to learn that the preparation for my life began at home in
Mm-hmm.
Pine Bluff with my mother and my aunt before I ever went away to prep school. Prep school is supposed to prepare you to go to college, but I really had preparation before I left home. Another takeaway is that I want readers to understand that because integrated schools became the law, people did not change their hearts. And that's something that we're still struggling with today. Our hearts have not changed in ways in which we interact and embrace others. Most of us think about ourselves and what we want, but rarely do we think about how we're designed to live in community with all people and live and be civil. And that's not always evident in the things that we do today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. My husband and I are always talking about different choices that either our kids make or other people in our lives make. And, we keep going back to it's a heart issue, and we're
It
not going to
is.
change behaviors necessarily. We can educate, we can instruct, but at the core, it's a heart issue.
It is. It
Hmm.
is. And you can't legislate the heart.
No, no, you cannot, ma'am. That is absolutely true. So so this was your fifth book. So I'm going to take you back to the first book that you wrote. And so what led you to start writing? Was that something that was instilled in you, or a gift that God gave you and you just chose to use it?
Well, it's a gift, I'll say that. And with the first book, it was really written I started writing it around the time my oldest daughter had her first child. And I started thinking, well, what's your plan for this child's life? Because we have financial plans, we have business plans, we have vacation plans, and they all have dates and timelines and budgets and visions for what we want to see happen. But we don't do that when it comes to the life of a child. And so I thought it was important, and I started just trying to draft something kind of like a will on a few sheets of paper. And I realized, oh, it's got to be more than this because people need to give some thought to the decisions that they make and why they make them. And for that book, the decisions were supposed to be based on scripture. And so that was my first one. It's called the Intentional Parenting Plan.
Oh, I love that. And, it brings to memory my very first boss out of college um, would make a comment that you have to have a license to drive a car, you have to have a license to drive a boat, you have to have a license to go fishing, but any person can get pregnant and have a child and not have any thought process in how to raise that child. So now you have an instruction manual for that.
Yeah, but the whole thing with getting a license, those are all privileges. Procreating is actually a human right. And so, no, you don't have to have a license, but it is important that you have some forethought as to what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I tell people usually when parents have a plan, the plan is for education and finances, but it doesn't address things like character, self image, conduct, and how, as parents, you shape those things for children to help them learn to be civilized in our society. And so when parents finish reading that book and using it, they have a written plan for the life of their child. And
Mhm.
most parents spend more time planning for a child's first birthday party than they do for anything else in the child's life. And
Wow.
that, to me, that is scary, because many times parents start 6 months ahead planning for the first birthday party and give it a lot of thought. They have a timeline, they have a budget, they have a vision for how they want it to be, but that's just for the first birthday party. And they have so many more years where there needs to be a plan for how you're going to interact and train your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about that in the health perspective in conception. We know now that the health of mom and dad 6 to 12 months before conception impacts the future, not only health of that child, but 2 generations ahead, especially for
Oh,
girls.
wow.
Yeah, it's because when I started researching and thinking about it and understanding the girls and their eggs that they have when they're born, those eggs that a daughter has, let's see if I always get confused. Okay, so when a baby girl is born today, she is born with the eggs that she will have to give birth to her future children. And the health of those eggs impact the health of her future daughter. And then that daughter, it's born with her eggs for her generation.
Yes.
So mom's health here, and then of course dad's health with the health of his sperm is going to impact their child and grandchildren. And so then you go backwards to this child or this mom who's pregnant, eggs came from her mother and her grandmother. So that maternal lineage of 4 or 5 generations is just mind blowing. So
Well, it's by design.
it is. Now, is your parenting book is that written or is it often used in a church Bible study group? Because it sounds like a great idea for that.
It has been, and I'm getting ready to revise that one, and there's going to be a new version coming out in the fall. It's been used, actually, an OBGYN used it in South Carolina with a parenting group that she had there.
I love that idea. That is so cool. Um, let's see here.
Yeah.
Very neat. So, how has being an author impacted your life? Has it opened doors or given you a different platform than maybe what you even dreamed of when you were in prep school?
Well, I hadn't considered in prep school the impact that my going to prep school had on my community. Never thought about that. And so one of the ways that this came about was I was talking to a friend, um, and I called him to express condolences for his mother's passing. And we ended up spending a lot of time talking about my prep school experience. And he was just curious about as to what it was about. And so this book has been quite different. The experience has been quite different with this book. Each book has been a different process, a different learning process for me, even a different writing process in many ways. And so I've had to grow as an author in ways that I had not imagined just in doing this book. I got a lot of solicited and unsolicited advice from people. I also ended up investing more in my work to make sure that it was the best product possible. And I actually launched my book at the school back in October. And they were quite supportive, quite gracious, and they're using my book in 2 of their classes there next semester. So it's been a real joy just to be on this leg of the journey.
Interesting. So for our younger generation out there that maybe have never heard of the terminology prep school, when you were growing up, so nowadays they go, kindergarten, preschool, whatever is before first grade. Then you've got your normal first through 12th grade, and then college and postgraduate. So in your growing up days, what was the prep school designed for, or at what process did that happen?
Okay, so prep school, it's called preparatory school. That's the official name, but most people just say prep school. And actually, there are prep schools that they're really private schools, independent schools. But mine was a boarding school. And so the comparable school to one of those would be Louisville Collegiate or Kentucky Country Day School. Only ours was a boarding school, and it was all girls. The sole purpose of those schools is to prepare you to go to college. The rigor is pitched at a totally different level with high expectations that everyone is going to rise to that level and achieve and then go on to a good college. Not just go to college, but to go to a really good college. And so everything that they did there, from classwork to study hall to test preparation to we had sit-down meals where you had to go Monday through Thursday and sit down in the dining hall in a formal dining setting and share a meal with classmates and teachers. And so that was just to get you ready for life.
Yeah. So it was your high school.
Yes, it was. I went in grades 10 through 12. The school has since added 6 through 8, 6 through 12. There are prep schools that have an elementary component. So they start with children as early as first grade. And the children are boarded there. They live there.
I don't know that I could do that with my little ones. I don't know if I could send them away.
Well, some people did. And there were classmates who had brothers and sisters in other prep schools who were younger than we were. And so that's what they did. Parents, and let me say this, they were wealthy parents. Mm-hmm. They were truly wealthy families. So
right. Yeah. And, I think that the meal portion of it is a piece that is lost in our world today and with the addition of all of the social media, the art of communication, of talking with somebody, having a face-to-face conversation or a phone call conversation has been lost because of our technology advancements and the idea of sitting down and the manners and how to eat and how to carry yourself in a meal is a totally lost art these days.
Well, it is for a lot of people. It really is. But that was part of the experience, and they wanted us to know and understand that. So they prepared us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So so you've got 5 different books, or 6?
5.
5. Okay, so your memoir is the number 5 book. So your first one is geared to parenting. This one is geared to anybody?
The audience it's actually young adults.
Okay.
But most of my readers have been mature adults. Most of my readers so far have been mature adults. In preparing this book, when I say I invested more in resources, I had over 25 reviewers give me feedback on this book before it ever came out. People who read it, who responded to questions, and most of them were mature adults. And then, with a wide age range. Some were teachers, some were retired people, just different walks of life who gave me feedback, and they enjoyed it. So the audience, while it's the target audience, is the young adult. It's a person who's in prep school or who's thinking about going to prep school, or maybe even parents of somebody who's going to prep school. That's the audience. Many of my classmates have read it. We were a small class, only 50 students in our graduating class, and several of them have read it. So
very good. So the feedback, so I don't think anybody that I have interviewed so far has talked about that step in the writing process. So one of the questions is, what advice would you give somebody who either thought, one day I'd like to write a book, or I have one in my heart and I don't know how to get it out? But so my question is, what advice would you give to that person who might be watching or listening today? And then I want you to speak to the review process, because nobody has really mentioned that so far.
well, if somebody's thinking about writing a book, the first thing I'd say is get started. Just get started. I started this one with not really an outline, but maybe an outline, because I just wrote down terms that would jog my memory, and I listed them, and I tried to list them in chronological order because this was going to be a memoir, and of course there were things that you had to include. But what I started with is not what I ended up with, because I started with just wanting to tell the prep school experience, and I had to go back. I also invested in attending a writers conference, and I met with an author there as an consultant, and the feedback that she gave me was valuable because there were some things that I assumed the reader would readily know just from reading the book, and she said, "Oh no, I don't know who all these people are. You've got to tell me this. You've got to tell the reader." And so I had to go back and tell additional stories. And so while I thought I was going one place, it ended up going a totally different place. But the other thing I did was I joined a writing challenge called Any Good Thing. And with Any Good Thing writing challenge, you commit to writing 400 words a day for 5 days a week. And if you do that in 4 weeks, you have 8,000 words because it's 2,000 words a week. So it's Any Good Thing writing challenge. And my goal was to just write 40,000 words. And it ended up being closer to 80,000 words. Because I ended up writing not just 400 words a day, sometimes it was 1,200 words or 2,400 words a day. But just get started. That's the main thing. And it takes discipline to get your bottom in the chair and write. You've got to sit down and actually do the work if you want the product. It's just like with anything else. If you want the product, you've got to do the work.
Yes, absolutely. So how much time was between book number 4 and book number 5?
3 years.
3 years. And
book number 4 came out in November of 2016, and this one came out in October of 2019.
So so the first one was parenting. The fifth one was, wherever my numbers are, the fifth one was your memoirs. So what were the middle 3 about?
The second book was a book on parenting also. And it's an invitation to parents. The title of it is Your Presence is Requested. And it's a series of essays on parenting and education. The third book is more like a devotional, and it's called All Your Words Are True, Reminders of God's Promises. And the fourth book, it's close to a memoir, but it's not quite. But it's the title of it is I Mastered Parenting, and here's what I did. And it's my journey as a mom, replete with pictures of me and my children.
Oh, how sweet. And then, so between the, so I understand now what you were saying, that the fifth one was really a different focus and a different writing. So what was it that caused you to say, on this one, I'm going to step up my game? I'm going to go to the writers conference. I'm going to.
Well, I wanted a different result. And I knew that I had to do some things differently if I wanted a different result. I couldn't do it the way I had done things previously. And I needed feedback from other people because most writers think what they put on paper is good. But it's not until you actually get feedback from other people that you know whether it's good or not, or whether it appeals to a wider audience than just you and people who look, think, and believe the way you do. And so this one I think has a wider appeal. The feedback that I got from different people really helped inform what I did. They would pose questions that made me think. Part of it, some people gave me feedback that I did not take. And so that's okay too, because I had to understand that it's mine. And I had a memoir coach who reminded me every step of the way, it's what you remember. It's not what anybody else tells you or shares that they remember. It's your memory. And so I wrote with that in mind.
I think that's a fabulous reminder that it's our story. It's whether it's our personal journey or whether it is the story that God has placed in us to share. It's
Mm-hmm.
our story. And while getting feedback is important from a comprehension standpoint, we don't want the feedback that says, no, this is your journey, or this should be your story, this is what you should do. So that's very wise insight.
Well, you don't allow someone else to control your narrative.
Mhm.
It is your story and you lived it and you tell it as you remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other comment that you made, that you wanted different results. So different results require us to make different choices or a different
Yes.
plan of action. That's very insightful. As my coach would say, that is a golden nugget right there for people to pay attention to.
Okay.
Yes, 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 yes. All right. Well, I think that's all of my question. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that maybe I didn't ask?
Well, let's see. My book is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Okay.
Uh, and people can inbox me if they'd like to have a copy, an autographed copy. It's
Hmm.
titled Prepped, Coming of Age in Black and White America. And once again, here's what it looks like. And that's me on the cover when I was 18. And I knew that I wanted to use that picture. I wasn't quite sure how. And I got with a cover designer and she made it happen.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's
Well,
beautiful.
thank you.
And I will put links at the bottom of the video to the Amazon links. Now, here's a burning question. So sometimes I listen to books on Audible and they're read by the author. Have you done that with any of your books?
I have not. I am doing it with this one.
With your memoir?
Yes, it should be done by March.
Interesting. So that's, again, that's a whole new piece of the puzzle that nobody's really talked about, is how do you go through that process of recording reading to get it into, we've talked a lot about self-publishing through different authors who have said they chose to self-publish when they first started. But we haven't really talked about the reading portion of it. And I know a lot of folks nowadays listen to their books instead of reading their paper books.
Well, I'll tell you more about that in another interview once I get it done.
I
Uh,
like it.
Yeah, because I've invested in some equipment and a space so that I can go and do it. I've had to do some research and consult with other people about the process. It's a lot easier than it was when I first started writing.
Yeah.
And so there are platforms where you can actually load it or actually record it and load it. And one of the things that I did, even with this book, to to for two reasons, I read it out loud to myself.
Mm.
One reason I did that was to catch mistakes that you don't catch when you're reading silently. And so in hearing, if you read every word that's there, then you can catch some of your own mistakes. The other thing that I did as I read it out loud was I timed myself so that I could get a feel for how long it would take me to actually have a recorded document. And so it looks like it's about 9.5 hours. And so that's just to read it. That's not anything else. That's not setup. That's not editing, just to read it. And
Yeah.
so I did that just because I knew I wanted to do it also as an audiobook.
Interesting. Well, I am very excited to read this book. So I will look forward to getting my own copy and reading it. So I
Okay.
think that is it. Thank you very much, Miss Vita. And if anybody is interested in having her come speak or utilizing any of her books in any workshops that you do, or Bible study classes, or parenting classes, or children growing up classes, I know she would be honored with that. So, with that, we will say goodbye for this Saturday. And
All
thank you
right.
again.